What should the Jazz do with pick 21, and who is worth moving up to go get? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name is Leif Thulin. I'm excited and honored to have the opportunity to fill in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. It's so fun to be back with you guys during my favorite part of the year with the NBA draft season, talking about my favorite team, the Utah Jazz. As you guys may know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan who's credentialed NBA draft analyst for a Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician the past 4 seasons, and a lifetime lover of college basketball. So don't expect all the geeky numbers you're accustomed to be gone, but I'll bring a unique perspective as a diehard college hoops fan who's seen all these guys play tons, NBA draft analyst and a Jazz employee, and a diehard fan to make you as knowledgeable as possible about your Utah Jazz. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question is, who do you prefer the Jazz select at 21? And if the Jazz were to move up, who do you want that to be? So engage with me. I love all the comments. I read them all today. I've been engaging with a lot of you guys on Twitter, and I really appreciate the support there. By the way, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Today on the show, I'm going to tell you about the names and the games of the guys I see as the top options for pick 21. I'll rank upside versus safety of each player and also list out who I would trade up for and how high in the draft I would think that you have to trade up for each player. So I've got 3 players that the Jazz may trade up for, and I've got 4 players I'm going to talk about the upside versus their safety as a pick. So let's dive right in. The guys we're going to discuss today are all wings because this is a spot, one, that I think the Jazz need and the NBA in general needs. I think you need wings to win. But also at 21 or thereabout in the draft, there are going to be a lot of wings selected just because I think that's how the board falls. So the guys we're going to discuss today are the following: Will Riley, Liam McNeeley, Nique Clifford, Drake Powell, Rasheer Fleming, Cedric Coward, Carter Bryant, and Noah Essengue. So I guess there's 4 guys that I think we'll have to trade up for. We'll give you the pitch there. So some of those guys will not be there at 21. I think there's 4 of them that will not. I'll talk about those. And that's where we'll get to the evaluation of how good are some of these guys and how high will the Jazz need to move to get any of them and how feasible is that. So let's start with the guys I think have a fairly high upside that will be there at 21. And I feel confident can be there at 21. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a guy that I haven't seen too much buzz around from Jazz Twitter, but I've seen some people in the draft community I respect, and also this is a guy that I like. So I'll start with him, Drake Powell. Drake Powell gets lost in the shuffle because it was an ugly season. UNC was bad. They had too many guards and not enough shooters, and he was a tremendous athlete, but it didn't touch the ball very often. And for a 5-star, that was not particularly good. However, I liked him a ton more than his teammate who had more collegiate success in Ian Jackson. The Jazz, the pitch for him is simple. He's the best athlete in the draft. The Jazz need athleticism, and he's 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan, 200 pounds of springy muscle, and he just moves differently than everyone else. He floats. It's kind of strange the way he moves. He just seems to be floating and light on his feet and powerful all at the same time. And my favorite part is basketball intelligence. Let's talk about what he's lacking, because I think that's going to be a point in the comments. They're going to say, wait a minute, he didn't do that much, Leif. I'm aware. But on the occasions when the ball did find him on a team that had numerous guards, R.J. Davis, a returning first-team All-American, a guy who handled the ball a ton, Elliot Cadeau, a non-shooting point guard who handled the ball, Seth Trimble, a slasher who is also in charge of backcourt stuff, Ian Jackson, who is a 5-star who they put the ball in the hands of. On the occasions when the ball did actually find him, he shot it pretty well. Even on guarded catch and shoots, and here's a number for you guys, he shot 44% on guarded catch and shoots. He was a good cutter, especially from the corners. When he cut from the corners, he was able to show timing. And timing is really important. That told me a lot about his basketball intelligence and versatility, because most of these guys who are 5-stars are the best player that they've ever played with. They're the best player that they'll ever play with. And then they go play with a guy who's better than them and 5 years older and don't know how to play. But there's stuff that needs to be fixed, but I am impressed by his versatility and ability to impact the game on both sides of the basketball, despite not touching the ball a ton and didn't pout. I think he will need to develop those offensive flashes to be able to apply his intriguing defensive tools, because you need to be able to play on both sides. Shooting's becoming more and more valuable. I think the reason that I'm enamored by the idea of Drake Powell is I watch his film, and though the athleticism is different, I think it's functional in the same way that Christian Braun's is. Christian Braun doesn't get the acclaim for being as good of an athlete as he is because of how he looks. Drake Powell doesn't face that point, but I think Christian Braun, when you watch him at Kansas, granted he was a junior when he came out, won every 50-50 ball, elevated for rebounds, shot open threes, attacked the rim aggressively, and now he's in the NBA, and there's a real world where the Nuggets are going to choose Christian Braun over Michael Porter Jr. because of his two-way defensive upside. When I watch Drake Powell, and I think back to prospects I've evaluated the last couple of years, Christian Braun was the name that popped into my head. That is the high side. This is why I'm saying this is a high upside guy. He's one of the high ceiling guys that I think the Jazz should take a gander at 21, because he has a 44-inch vertical, because this guy can defend multiple positions. He can hound point guard and play big and bump against 6'9" wings. He's got a 7-foot wingspan and knows how to play the game of basketball. He reminds me of Christian Braun, and that's a fantastic outcome at 21. His floor might be slightly limited due to shooting concerns. That's why I say he's a high upside guy, a little bit of a high risk, high reward. So he's one guy to be interested in. The other guy that I want to say is a high upside guy, but I think his floor is different and maybe makes him a little bit more alluring than, say, Drake Powell, even if I think Drake Powell's ceiling is higher, is Will Riley. Will Riley measured in at taller than Ace Bailey at the combine. So he's a very slender wing. He went to Illinois. Will Riley, for the everydayers, David Locke talked about a little bit, and I think Rafael Barlow touched on him a little bit, but basically he ran a ton of pick and rolls. This is why you draft him. He ran a ton of pick and rolls on a team that had two ball handlers, one of which, Kasparis Yakichonis, was one of the highest pick and roll operators, and yet he still ran a ton of pick and roll, speaking of Will Riley. And he was 90th percentile in isolation, which is something that's interesting because he's not the most twitchy, quick twitch guy, but demonstrates impressive skill, guile, confidence, especially for someone who is 19 and played most of last season at 18 years old on a Big Ten team that had high aspirations, was a 6th seed in March Madness, won a game in the tournament. He didn't shoot it particularly well, but that actually encourages me because he kept shooting. The volume is the thing that I think matters the most about shooting. Everyone says, free throw percentage is the true indicator. And if you can't shoot, you can't shoot. But you look at the guys who are the best shooters that come out of these drafts, it's because they shoot a ton and their team trusts them to take these shots. I think it demonstrates impressive skill and confidence for someone at 18 years old to be trusted to take that many shots and have that unabashed confidence throughout the season, be a 90th percentile isolation guy who didn't shoot particularly well, but yet is still trusted to shoot that ball. And then he can put the ball on the deck and score for himself and run over 100 pick and rolls. That's really, really impressive, especially on a team that had two backcourt players that were primary ball handlers. And he scored 31 points in his debut. And there's just not many people that have the self-belief that they can step into a basketball game and score 31 points at the collegiate level as an 18-year-old. And he did that. His percentages, like I said, at the NCAA level aren't super impressive, but he's a 40% three-point shooter in high school, and many of those were self-created, which leads me to believe there's more versatility. And that leads me to my final contention, right? Skilled 6'8", 6'9" wings that are barefoot at 6'8.5", with the ability to confidently pull up from 28 feet and throw live dribble passes with either hand, capably relocate off the ball, navigate pick and rolls, and find the right player to pass to, or elevate and score on the interior, or get all the way to the rim. They just aren't common. And so that is why that Will Riley skill set is an alluring skill set and is one that intrigues me. And if the Jazz have him on the board at 21, he would be among my favorite candidates. Riley's size grants him angles and vantage points that make him more different than many wings, because I think he's got a guard skill set and a wing's body. The big thing about him that does give me pause and why I say he's a high ceiling rather than a high floor is he must get stronger. So I think his floor suffers a bit because we don't know what happens if he doesn't get stronger. Then I don't think he's playable on defense. But his skill really intrigues me. If he gets stronger and continues to shoot better, I think he could be somewhat similar to Keyshawn George, who really impressed, except he's 3 years younger when being drafted. Keyshawn George was really good his rookie year with the Wizards. the concern with him at Miami was, oh, he didn't shoot that well and he's versatile, but like he wasn't that good of a shooter and he's slow footed. Will Riley is a little bit more athletic than him and has some of that secondary facilitation ability, as well as I think better shooting than Keyshawn George. And Keyshawn George, I think, has been a steal for the Wizards that was picked in the mid-20s last year. Another player that reminds me of a little bit in terms of how he played in college is he's a more athletic version of Jet Howard, and Jet went 11th a few years ago. So younger, better ball skills, better finishing, better isolation skills. So on one hand, that encouraged me, but the concern is there in terms of lacking defensive upside and not being the twitchiest person. So that scares me a little bit, and that's why I have him as a high ceiling, relatively low floor guy. I have him at 20th on my board, and if he's there at 21, like I said, the Jazz should take a long look at Will Riley because his skill set is rather rare for someone being available at 20 or 21. So coming up next, we're going to talk about two guys that I have above the two I just mentioned, but I see as having higher floors and being more immediately ready for NBA action. And we're also going to talk about why the floor versus ceiling matters for a team like the Jazz, who, we're not going to be very good the way the roster is constructed right now. So we'll talk about that and much, much more all ahead on Locked On Jazz. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 points or more in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. So just place an order of $20 or more. Use the code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms do apply. So imagine being rewarded with free food because someone went off for 50. Imagine that was around when Donovan and Jamal Murray were trading 50 pieces. That's fresh in your guys' mind like it is mine. Well, you don't have to imagine anymore because that's a real reality now. So here's the play. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 plus in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with an order of $20 or more and code WINGSTOP50. That's Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. I also want to tell you guys all about Murdoch Hyundai. They've been in Utah for over 80 years. That's longevity you can trust and depend upon. Murdoch's the best car for your money. They have safety features, bells, whistles, all in amazing cars, all at amazing prices. I've worked with them, the guys down in Murray, and they set me and my family up with a rental car a while ago, and it was lovely. I drove the Tucson, and the Tucson treated me very nicely. It was up to the bells and whistles were fantastic. Anytime you change lanes, it illuminates and tells you exactly what's there and beeps if you're too close to lines. Very safe car. And the SUV lineup has more than just the Tucson, which I couldn't recommend highly enough. They have the Kona, the Tucson, the Santa Fe, the Palisade. And then there's also the Ioniq 5 and 6. Both of those have been voted very well by the SUV Motor Trend, the Motor Trend SUV of the year, as voted by Motor Trend, and the 6 was even better. It looks a little bit like a Porsche and won the World Car of the Year. There are 3 locations in Linden, Murray, and Logan. I can tell you about the guys in Murray, give you a very serious testimonial about how great they were, and I'm sure the people at Linden and Logan are just as great. So make sure to tell them that we sent you in from Locked On Jazz, and they'll take great care of you. All right, welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here, and we're going through picks that I think will be around pick 21. So players that have high ceilings were what we discussed the previous segment. Now let's talk about some guys with high floors, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to talk about older players, because today I talked about the CBA, and David's been talking about this, how the CBA changes. You want more players on cheaper contracts to build depth, and so there will be some more players that are older that are more alluring. One is a senior here that I'm going to talk about. That's Nique Clifford. The other one is a freshman named Liam McNeeley. So let's talk about Nique Clifford first. Nique Clifford is rising up boards, and it's an interesting one because I've liked Nique Clifford for about 3 draft cycles. I mentioned I went to the Combine the last 2 years. Nique Clifford was there, and Nique Clifford was at Colorado prior to Cody Williams' stint in Colorado. And honestly, the reason that Nique Clifford is as alluring as a draft prospect as he is right now is because Cody Williams went to Colorado, and that ousted Nique Clifford to go to Colorado State and become a star. He followed the route of Brandon Pajemski, who went from Illinois to Santa Clara in order to become a star. And Nique Clifford did the same. So the reason that this has intrigue is when I watched Nique Clifford, I said, man, this guy really rebounds the ball. Like, he rebounds the ball and he makes open shots and he makes the right cuts. And I'd seen it because I was in Pac-12 country. I saw Colorado play numerous times, and they had good players on their team. They had Tristan Da Silva, who was the 18th pick. And they, this is a team that I saw plenty. And I always thought, wow, this guy's pretty good. But at Colorado State, he did what I thought was going to be impossible for him and was fantastic as not only a good rebounder, a good defender, but an excellent scorer and excellent shooter. He was a tremendous rebounder. 19 points per game, 9.6 rebounds, 38% from three, and that's plug and play. No, he was able to excel as a star. He was able to excel as a defensively oriented 3-and-D guy. He can pass the rock. He does a ton. I have him number 18 on my board. He's 23 years old, though, and he's been 23 for a little bit. So that's why I have him just slightly above Will Riley, despite significantly more production. He has these high steal and block percentages that are very rare, and he's not super big. He's 6'6", right? He's 6'6.5", and that shows his positional savvy and intelligence. He rebounds his position extremely well, a la Josh Hart. That's a comparison you'll hear plenty of. I've got another one that I think isn't as common as Josh Hart, but I think is a similar vein. And he finds ways to create opportunities to create turnovers. Sometimes it's his deflection that gets it for someone else. Sometimes he grabs the ball, blocks a shot, and keeps it in. He gets a fingertip on people's shots. He is able to dig at the post and dislodge the ball. I think no matter the team scheme, he's going to be able to play. And that really matters in today's NBA, that you can play effectively as a player on offense and defense. Now, when it comes to offense, this is where he really stood out in his fifth season. Clifford got the opportunity to experiment with the ball in his hands. After the year prior, they had a point guard by the name of Isaiah Stevens, who's now on the Miami Heat G League team and is an excellent pick and roll guy. This year, the ball is in the hands of Nique Clifford, and he's always been a willing passer, but now he was the guy, and he was making V reads. His pick and roll reps were astronomically higher. And interestingly, he shot the ball significantly better in those actions than in any other situation. So off the dribble, he was able to score with decent volume, both shooting and driving. And he created his own offense in isolation more than ever, as opposed to being the beneficiary of an offensive savant at the Mountain West level, Isaiah Stevens. And he even took reps in the post and dominated down there, just physically overwhelming players. I think Nique Clifford goes to the NBA and is able to instantly step in and say, you know what? I can play this role and play defense, shoot open threes, run the floor, play with energy, and be a winning basketball player. The Jazz don't have that many guys that I feel confident, even that have been in the NBA for a while, that I feel confident can be as solid at so many things as Nique Clifford is. Nique Clifford is rising up the board. My other comparison for him is Pat Connaughton. So Josh Hart's better than Pat Connaughton, don't get me wrong. Josh Hart just has this like superhuman ability to go get the basketball. I think Nique Clifford's got it to some degree, but Josh Hart was doing that at Villanova as the Big East Player of the Year when he was younger than Nique Clifford was as the Mountain West guy. Like that does matter. And Josh Hart in the NBA at 6'4" averages 10 boards per game in playoff series. Like he has a tenacious motor that I think is hard to give someone else. Pat Connaughton, when he was at Notre Dame, was an excellent rebounder and scorer, and he played alongside very good players, and he was on Elite Eight teams that pushed the Kentucky team that was 38-0 before they lost to Wisconsin. I think Pat Connaughton is a good realistic outcome for Nique Clifford. I think it's likely that Nique Clifford is a more consistent shooter and on-ball defender. Connaughton was a good on-ball defender for a little bit and then faded. I think he's somewhere in between Josh Hart and Pat Connaughton. That's a guy, if you were to take him at 21, you should feel ecstatic. I always like players that have been a star in their role or someone who has been the star of a team. I think that versatility really is important. I talked about Mikal Bridges plenty, about how at Villanova he was a role player, played his role to perfection for the Phoenix Suns, became the best 3-and-D in the NBA, then went to Brooklyn and was a 20-point scorer, and they said, I didn't know he had that. That's what Nique Clifford did in college. I think he'll be a role player in the NBA for a long time. And that's why I think his floor is tremendously high. I do think for the Jazz, what he would do best is he adds positional understanding of what his role is and ability to execute at all things. The next guy that's early in the season was seen as high as top 10 because he was on a team that most people thought was going to be a top 10, a top 5 team, and his role would be solid. And it would be what he'd do in the NBA was Liam McNeeley, but instead he fell. And he's now somewhere between 15 and 25 because I think he's being evaluated unfairly. He was perpetuated into a role that very few freshmen have to take. That was the 2-time defending national champions. And he was supposed to be the second or third best player. Instead, he was the best player and asked to create as their primary advantage creator. And he was able to go downhill and score and do things like that. But what he should have been doing is shooting standstill threes. And if he was shooting standstill threes, I dug up the numbers, standstill. So these are not just catch and shoots. These are the ones where he is the spot up guy. And he was 43% from three. Everyone talks about, his shooting dipped. Like he was not a good shooter. He shot 31% from three. Yeah, I agree. That's not particularly good. But when he was doing what the job that he would be doing in the NBA was, he shot 43% from three. And this UConn team took a major dip in terms of unguarded catch and shoot looks as compared to other Dan Hurley teams because they just didn't have the dominant forces. They had the best rookie last year, Stephon Castle, who I had at number 1 on my board. And they had him play as the fourth option. Now this freshman comes into the board, and it's Liam McNeeley. He's the best player on the team, not just the fourth option, not just the best NBA prospect. He was the top option. And at times he did really well. He joined the likes of Kevin Durant and Michael Beasley as the only freshman to go on the road and score 35 points and 10 rebounds. He did that against Creighton. He scored 38 and 10 and won against a good Creighton team. And he carried teams at time, but his efficiency dipped, and that's what all the analytic nerds are telling you about. McNeeley, to me, handles the ball pretty well, especially for someone that you would say, he's a spot-up shooter. Like, I think he's a pretty good dribbler of the basketball. He's not super fast, but he's strong. He's rugged. And I think he makes winning plays. Like, in those games where UConn was trying to find their identity and figure out what they were, as opposed to saying, we were the national champions, they were figuring it out, and they gave it to Liam McNeeley, and he went downhill, attacked off movement, got to the basket. Wasn't a fantastic finisher, but how many freshmen are? How many freshmen are fantastic finishers? Not that many. And last I checked, 15-6 as the best player on a tournament team that took the eventual national champion Florida Gators to the wire, the absolute wire, and shot 86% from the free throw line. That's a solid basketball player. For those reasons, I have number 15 on my board. And I think similar to Nique Clifford, he slots in as a productive basketball player, but I don't see star in his future in the NBA. But there's so many teams that could use productive basketball player somewhere between their 3 through 8 in terms of a hierarchy of best player to worst player. He reminds me a little bit of a souped down Bojan Bogdanovic, not as skilled of a scorer, but somewhere of the ilk of Bojan in the sense that he's a hard-nosed scorer. He's someone who doesn't overplay, and he'll battle defensively, give you his all, and he's a really good positional rebounder. For the small forward position, he's able to crash the glass and find boards out of nowhere. He knows where to be on the basketball court. He plays with high intelligence. He also played at Montverde next to Cooper Flagg and Derek Queen, and he's plenty fine at all levels of life, being a third option, fourth option, and tried hard to figure out how to be the top option on a team that expected to win a national championship with not a very good team. That was the expectation, and I think it was hard for him, and people, I think, are missing the context on watching him. I think if he's there at 21, the Jazz would end up with a very smart pick there. May not be the flashiest pick, but that's why I think he has a high floor as opposed to the highest upside. So coming your way next are the players I prefer in the wing position. I have over all the guys I've mentioned already, but I don't think the Jazz can get at pick number 21. So how high do they have to reach to get these guys, and why are they appealing so much so that I think it's worthwhile to move up? All that and more ahead on Locked On Jazz. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track of time. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track the spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever, and you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNBA at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com and the code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. We're talking the 21st pick, but not so fast. Maybe there's some guys that if they fall to a certain point in the draft are too much of a, oh, I like this guy, we better go get him. So I'm going to tell you about those guys for me. And because I've been evaluating this draft, not just recently, but for the entire year. And these are the guys that I've said, I really want the Jazz to take at 21. And then I realized, oh, they're too good for 21, and everyone is starting to know it. So the first one, I've even told you guys about on Locked On Jazz for the everydayers with a fantastic memory. I talked about him in February. This is Carter Bryant. I love Carter Bryant. Talked about him on Locked On Jazz in February. And on NBA Big Board, I was asked numerous times by scouts, but also by Rafael Barlow. And we talked about this. Who's your favorite prospect that's outside the lottery? Who's your favorite prospect that's outside the first round? I said Carter Bryant every single time. Carter Bryant in November was projected 43rd on Tankathon. I had him 13. The point is not to brag there, but the reason is everyone's seeing what I saw initially. Carter Bryant is in everyone's lottery and will be hard to trade up for, but here's why the Jazz should trade up for Carter Bryant if he's available 10 through 12. If he finds his way outside the top 10, it's more likely teams outside of the top 10 are willing to make a deal because only 50% of players become role players after 2 or 3 years that are drafted 11 through 30. So if he falls outside the top 10, teams are going to say, you know what, if we can get an actual established NBA player for this draft pick, maybe we should. And that's where he has to fall in order to make it, but I don't think he falls beyond there. So Carter Bryant, why do I love him so much? Well, he has one of the lowest usage ratings of any player to go in the top 30, scoring just 6.5 per game. Bryant's an unbelievable defender. Like I see true upside as a lockdown defensive player. He is someone that made me fall in love with his game because you watch him move and he slides his feet like a point guard for someone with a big body. And his body was NBA ready and then some as a true freshman. He could grow and it would be, wow, oh my goodness, what is this superhuman freak doing here? And he was already that fleet of foot, that graceful moving on the perimeter, tracking both guards and banging with bigger bodies as a true freshman. This is also someone who's a McDonald's All-American and I know had more skills to demonstrate for Arizona. But Arizona, like I mentioned, context is a big deal. This is a team that had a guy who was the reigning Pac-12 Player of the Year and Caleb Love. This is a guy in Caleb Love who shoots the ball often. Jaden Bradley's not a pass-first point guard. This is a team in Arizona that had 3 bigs and only made headway into getting better because their starting center got hurt. Mo Krivas gets hurt, and it allows for Vasar and Awaka to be this one's skillful, one's a bruiser. So where does Carter Bryant play as a 3 or a 4 when he's next to these guys? And wait a minute, we need a shooter because we have 2 bruisers on the interior. We need a shooter, and we already have 2 guards that are ball in hand. So where does Carter Bryant figure in? The answer was he could do whatever he wanted, and he still found a way onto the court. Probably should have gotten more playing time and more usage, but he knocked down 38% of threes, has processing speed that's rare for someone that's not got the ball in his hands often to make those decisions. He's a very adept passer. I buy the shot because I think he can knock it down both off the dribble and knock down threes. He just didn't do it very often because that's not what was asked of him. He knocked down big shots in big games, played well against the primary opposition. He would guard the best player. He guarded Cooper Flagg, and I thought athletically he looked in the same realm as Cooper Flagg. Flagg just looked more confident with his game, and that's the number 1 pick in this class and the guy that I think would be the number 1 next year. You know who he reminds me of? And I've said this before. This might actually be something I said the previous time. I don't remember. But he reminds me a little bit of Denver Jeremy Grant in the sense that Denver Jeremy Grant started to believe in his abilities. And for his size and athletic ability, he moved his feet alarmingly well. But he has more tools that were yet to be discovered. And then when he went to Detroit, he said, hey, I can do all this. And he explored Detroit as a 20-point-per-game NBA scorer, albeit not the most effective one, but he said, I can do it. And I can see that with Carter Bryant. I think he can be a scorer, but where he's going to hang his hat is be a defensive guy, and it looks like he's got the buy-in to do so. Never complained, played 6-man minutes. I probably, if he'd gone back to school, I would imagine he would have transferred and gotten a chance to shine. But there's a reason that everyone's got him in the top 10, top 15. And I have him number 10 or 11 on my board. And if I were the Jazz, I would try to go up and get him. Like, that's number 1 of these guys for me to go up and get. Like that, I think if he gets to 10 or 12, you go up and ring the bell and say, we're going to give you 21 in the future. We really like Carter Bryant. I think that's a possibility. Now, another guy who's a bit of a draft nerd darling for much of the season, but now is a common name, is Cedric Coward. He shot up boards at the combine because he has crazy long arms, shot the ball well at Wazoo. He's got a weird circuitous story. He was playing junior college, then went to Willamette College, which is a D3 in the Pacific Northwest, then went to Washington State and just played 6 games. So why is this guy top 15 worthy? On offense, he can make fairly well and shoot 38% from 3. That's appealing. He's a confident spot-up shooter, knows how to use his length pretty well to get to the rim, score over smaller defenders in the post, and plays with a efficient offensive approach. He doesn't force too much, and he had a lot of 30-point games against inferior competition. The one game he didn't play particularly well on offense, I watched all of. He played Iowa, and you still felt like, oh, that guy's the best player on the floor because he took away Iowa's best player, face guarded him, and so much so this guy, Peyton Sanford, is a fantastic shooter and tested the NBA Combine last year, did not score at all when Coward was guarding him. His activity and length and on the defensive end is intriguing to me as a multi-positional stopper because he's got 7'3" wingspan at 6'6". I also think there's a world in which he thinks he's a point guard. I don't think that's what he is in the NBA, but it does lead me to believe that he's got some playmaking capacity at the NBA level. I have a number 14 on my board right now, and I would trade up for him because due to the necessity that the NBA has put on having athletic guys who can be able to create, like you just can't have too many of those type of guys, and the Jazz don't have that many. If he's there at 12 through 16, probably on the 14 to 16 side of things, and the staff really believes in the vision of, hey, this is what we're going to outline for his role to be, I would go for that trade. I'm a little less bullish on him than I am Carter Bryant in terms of the defensive upside. I think he's going to be good, but Carter Bryant, I think, has a chance to be excellent defensively. I would still make that trade. I think he's going to be drafted somewhere between 12 through 16. So if the Jazz like him, that's the trade. How much do you put on that trade as opposed to getting up to 10? I think as the further you get down in the teens, the less you got to give. Lastly, Rasheer Fleming is drawing rave reviews, and many Jazz fans seem to be infatuated with him, and I get it. But I have some pause here, and this is the one that I don't know if I trade up for. Fleming is big. He's a big dude. 6'9", 7'5" wingspan, shot 39% from 3. I get it. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's fantastic. That's impressive, and it was decently high volume, and I'm not trying to nitpick, but he improved a ton in year to year, but he dominated athletically versus inferior competition in the A-10. And to boost his stock, he did so as a junior, and he wasn't the top option on their offense. And this is a team that wasn't particularly good either. So you don't necessarily say, oh, that's a winning player. He did have a really good game against Texas, against Trey Johnson. He did have a good game against Texas Tech and made the Elite Eight. So athletically, he belongs, no doubt about it. But I wonder if his game offensively is as pretty as the numbers say versus what my eyes watched. And everyone's saying, well, he shot 39% from 3 and he's huge. Therefore, he's going to be good. Now, that said, I've loved even the draft misses that have his physical makeup. Like Patrick Williams, I loved because he's got a super long arm, big hands, shot 80% from the free throw line at Florida State as a freshman. Tari Eason had high on the boards as well, and I think he's outperformed his draft stock, but you wouldn't say, wow, Tari Eason's the best player in the world. Kawhi Leonard's obviously the leader of the clubhouse in this, and I'm not comparing them at all, but he's just long arms, big hands. Rasheer Fleming averaged 14.7, 8.5 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, 1.4 steals, while shooting 39% from 3 on 4.5 attempts. Like, if you told me that, I say, okay, that's top 15 pick. But I do wonder, is this guy a power forward that everyone's saying can be a small forward, even though his skill set is absolutely power forward related, and he's a lob threat more than I think he's a true NBA sharpshooter because he shot 29% from 3 as a freshman. And his touch is solid, but I kind of, you know what I see? I see an older version of Taylor Hendricks. And Taylor Hendricks, I think the reason that he went in the top 10 was, look, this guy shot 39% from 3, and he's a freshman. Everyone thinks we're going to build him out, and he's raw, he's moldable. This is a guy who's a junior who did it at a smaller school than UCF was. And as Taylor Hendricks came into the NBA, I watched it firsthand. His shot wasn't as good as the 39% said. He struggled tremendously when he was playing NBA minutes as a first-year player in the NBA. Then his final 2 months, he improved, but I also think the defense didn't care if he shot for a little while. Defensively, Taylor Hendricks, I think, is more rangy than Fleming. Fleming's more of a shot blocker as a weak side guy. I think Hendricks, the appeal is that he can slide his feet, but he's 2 years younger than Fleming, and Hendricks has some room to grow. Obviously, I'm optimistic about Taylor Hendricks. You watch him athletically develop, but I don't think Fleming's got that athletic jump that we can see with Taylor Hendricks because he's 2 years older, and he did so as a secondary option, maybe even tertiary on offense if you really want to get into the weeds on St. Joe's offense. he was a secondary or tertiary option, and his shooting, I think, is a little better. So I have him 22nd on my board. I'm lower than most on him. So trading up is a little less appealing to me, but I do think he has unique traits, and I won't complain about going up and getting a guy with unique traits because traits matter in the NBA, and I won't be bothered if we see his traits as too unique to pass up and move up upon. So my draft buzz is telling me he goes somewhere between 16 and 20. So it's a narrow trade up. I don't think you have to give as much up. And like I said, for those of you who like comparisons, my comparison is Taylor Hendricks. I've got one more guy. This guy I don't think the Jazz are going to be able to get. It's Noah Essengue. Noah Essengue, I think, is going to go in the top 10. He's playing productive basketball for France right now. I think the Jazz would really have to package up and say, oh, he's at 10. Let's go. Let's make the home run pitch. And you say, well, he's big, he's long, he's shooting better than we thought he could. He gets to the free throw line more frequently than collegiate version of Julius Randle. Like, that's the big appeal. It's not just a baby giraffe like Tijon Salaun or a baby giraffe that came in and you didn't know what he was getting. I think he's more of the ilk of Bilal Coulibaly, where his actual impact on the French basketball league is substantial, and you just didn't know it because it's not Victor Wembanyama. Like, that was Bilal Coulibaly's pitch. You're like, oh, this guy's really good. It's just like we didn't notice it because he's next to Victor. And now I think you watch Essengue can score the basketball. Defensively has all the traits. He's long, he's strong, he's authoritative on offense as opposed to a wallflower. I think he's going to go in the top 10. That's just what my gut is telling me. I think the Jazz would have to make a pitch that's even more of a wealthy pitch than what it would be for Carter Bryant. I think Carter Bryant and Noah Essengue are on the same level for me. I have Carter right now 11. I think I have Essengue 12. So right now, those guys are top 10-ish picks. I think Essengue goes higher than Bryant if I had to bet. So I don't think the Jazz can get him, but I just wanted to be inclusive in case some of you guys are like, what about Essengue? What about Essengue? And you're right. He's an appealing pitch. So let me know what you guys think. What guy is the number one option for you guys at 21? What guy do you covet the most to trade up for? And what do you think of the evaluations, the comparisons? Please let me know what you guys think. And make sure to tune in to other shows as well, like Locked On NBA Big Board. Thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen day. For your second, check out Locked On NBA Big Board. Draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And we'll keep talking about the draft. We'll also talk about some trade opportunities coming up soon. I'm scheduling with Tony Jones, and I have another special guest who really knows the NBA draft as well. So we're going to get you covered very well heading into a critical juncture for the Jazz. Thank you, as always, for listening, and I'll be seeing you tomorrow.